Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IoT For All Podcast. I'm Ryan Chacon, and on today's episode, we're going to talk about what 2023 holds for LoRaWAN and IoT. With me today is going to be Donna Moore, the CEO and Chairwoman of the LoRa Alliance. They are an open, nonprofit association closely collaborating and sharing their experiences to help promote and drive the success of the LoRaWAN standard. Great episode here. Please subscribe to this channel if you have not done so already. Hit that bell icon so you get the latest episodes as soon as they're out, and give this video a thumbs up. All right, before we get into this, we have a quick word from our sponsor. Silicon Labs, a leader in secure, intelligent, wireless technology, has launched their 2023 Tech Talk schedule. This year's Tech Talks include dedicated technology series for Matter, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and LPWAN in order to help you build the development skills needed to deliver cutting-edge IoT products. Join Silicon Labs experts and industry leaders for these one-hour live virtual trainings created for developers by developers. Accelerate your device development today by registering at silabs.com. That's the letter S, the letter I, labs.com. Welcome, Donna, to the IoT For All Podcast. Thanks for being here again as a fantastic guest.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Always happy to come and have a chat with you.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Let's kick this off just for any of our audience who may be unfamiliar. Have you give a quick introduction about yourself and the LoRa Alliance, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, that's great. I'm Donna Moore. I'm the CEO and Chairwoman of the LoRa Alliance. The LoRa Alliance has been around for 7 years, going on our 8th year. And we do low power wide area networking. We have had strong momentum over the last few years in terms of driving our standard forward. Last year we became an official standard by ITU. And
Nice.
so just incredible strides supporting the planet and this world and
Yeah,
businesses moving forward for sure.
that's fantastic. So I wanted to dive into kind of a conversation that's going to talk in a couple different ways about LoRaWAN and IoT this year, last year, kind of what we're most excited about, how the alliance is playing a role in that, and so forth. But let's kick this off and talk about 2022 real quick. Where were the biggest strides made in 2022? Like, which use cases led the way? Is anything surprise you that happened? Changes or kind of obviously becoming a standard is fantastic. Any other things that happened in the LoRaWAN world that kind of really made 2022 kind of end where it was?
Yeah, 2022 was actually a very explosive year in a good way.
Okay.
With the world opening up from COVID and everybody getting together, and we just saw such a burst of energy. We had the LoRaWAN World Expo in Paris in July. That
Yep.
was a huge success. And at that event, we really saw all the pent-up demand, all the work that had been happening, kind of behind the scenes, but we didn't see it because we weren't, getting together at events. And so I would say 2022, again, getting together and having Paris, the biggest change that I saw in 2022 was the industry moving from asking questions about what is LoRaWAN to really a journey of how do I implement LoRaWAN? How
Okay.
do I find devices? What are
Right.
best practices? How do I collaborate with other companies? How do I integrate it into my system? And that was probably the biggest change from an industry perspective, and very exciting to see it. So um, the other thing in 2022 that we saw is that the time from proof of concepts to actual deployments dropped dramatically.
Hmm.
Used to be maybe a year and a half for a proof of concept, and we saw that drop down to 5 to 6 months. Getting the return on investment, actually usually greater return on investment than anticipated, and rolling out LoRaWAN. So those are probably the biggest things that we saw in 2022.
Were there any use cases that kind of stuck out to you where adoption kind of increased or was maybe bigger than you expected throughout the year that's worth noting?
So I would say that actually in all the areas that we look at are
Hmm.
six key vertical areas, which, buildings, utilities, smart
Sure.
city, agriculture, asset tracking, and certainly industrial, all move forward in a very big way.
Okay.
However, I would say the top three would be cities, buildings, and utilities, and
Mm.
the use cases around that. And primarily because if you look at really LoRaWAN strengths, battery operated devices, long
Right.
distance,
Right.
deep signal penetration,
Right.
low cost, um, because of our strengths in those areas in particular, we saw some of the greatest growth.
Hmm.
And in fact, in 2023, there's so much that LoRaWAN can do. We really said, okay, we're going to try to focus, not that we're not still doing it all, but as an alliance, we're going to focus on three verticals. And those three for 2023 are cities, buildings, and utilities because of
Yeah.
the growth that we saw in 2022.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've seen in similar conversations that I've had, or recent conversations I've had, the buildings and the industrial outside of the lower wind space have been pretty hot areas of growth. And to your point earlier about kind of big changes you saw in 2022, going from kind of focusing on the technology to focusing on the adoption and the use cases, I've noticed that kind of across IoT as a whole as well. And I started to really see that when I went to CES back in January, where most companies were less focused on showcasing technology and more focused on showcasing what companies were
Mhm.
doing with their technology, successful deployments, actual solutions that were out in the market being used to kind of help build up some level of um, just kind of credibility to what they were
Mhm.
doing as opposed to just trying to impress you with their technology. People now need
Right.
to see this implemented in order to feel more comfortable about going down the path of adoption.
Right. I mean, and back to my point about the change of the questions and the change of the IoT industry in general, right? I
Yeah,
mean, we've already proven out the ROI is there. We have so many deployments around the world that the question about, does it work? Is this the right technology? We've moved past all of that. And,
right.
just looking at replication, we have so many cities that have deployed LoRaWAN, and we have a recipe about why and how to help additional cities move forward. And so some of our use cases are or not use cases but deployments are 3-5 years old, and they've
Right.
really added on additional use cases from the network, and where they've got 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 different types of use cases on the LoRaWAN network.
Well, I think that's such an interesting point about LoRaWAN in general. And when I got involved in the space about 7 years ago now, and I
Hmm.
started to learn about LoRaWAN and kind of the power of what this could bring to solutions, that
Hmm.
was one of the biggest things that was really pushed. And I know, and now we're starting to see it in practice more day after day. Is how once you deploy a LoRaWAN network, how extensible it is to add on new applications
Hmm.
without much of a hassle. And how are you seeing that kind of contribute to the adoption in the three areas: cities, buildings, and industrial? Because I imagine that if you really think about those individual industries as a whole, they kind of are ripe for multiple
Hmm.
use cases within a building, within a factory, and we're within obviously a city. And I imagine this is kind of why LoRaWAN is such a big deal and plays such a good role there.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. And if we just look at smart cities, right? Many, not all, but many smart cities will start with lighting, right? And they'll
Yep.
use the
Exactly.
poles as a gateway.
Yep.
And so that's around safety and energy conservation. But immediately move to, trash and parking and
Hmm.
air quality, and then they start bringing utilities depending on the city. And we've got, water is huge for
Sure.
LoRaWAN in terms of water waste management, water quality. Gas is huge for LoRaWAN with gas leaks,
Sure.
paying bills and making sure that the usage matches the bills. So, I mean, the use cases really are almost endless.
Yep.
And the same thing with buildings. I mean, they put in the network, and a lot of times they started back in COVID or right after COVID with, monitoring space and monitoring the cleanliness or monitoring the bathrooms. And then they, moved on to air quality, and they've moved on to water leak management. And again, the use cases just keep adding. And
Yeah.
what that does is it just allows the ROI to continue to build. But I
Right.
think, and I just want to take a little divergent
Sure.
here. I think that the key is, with the world the way it is today, the reality is businesses and governments must operate in a different manner.
Okay.
With labor shortages and inflation and supply chain issues, honestly, there's really not a choice if but to be more effective and efficient in your operations. And I think that is one of the biggest drivers for LoRaWAN. I mean, we're out there, we're proven, we're global. Um, but the reality is, businesses are looking for solutions because they have to
Mm,
move forward with the world the way it is today, and they have to be more efficient.
yeah.
And LoRaWAN provides all that.
Absolutely. I had a recording earlier with Vinka from the Things Industries,
Yeah.
and he was kind of making some similar points with, and then I brought up kind of the experience we kind of witnessed during the pandemic as companies had to learn how to be more efficient and do more with less remotely. Um, that kind of caused IoT to really rise to the top, and he was kind of talking about how with LoRaWAN, kind of what that enables for organizations to do. Because at the root of it, with IoT being able to kind of be focused around improving efficiencies within organizations, helping them do more with
Mhm.
less, helping them monitor things remotely, it kind of feeds right into that. And we were talking more so about just kind of the tra- um, general kind of path of the economy right now. And with so much uncertainty, companies are kind of hesitant on where they should be diverting their time and money. And IoT kind of rises to the top a lot because of what it enables organizations to do. How can it generate new business models and new revenue streams, while at the same time making them more efficient, and doing more with less resources, things like that. And to your point about LoRaWAN being something that really fits into that from a technology standpoint is very much in line.
Very much so. And the other thing too, agree with all of that. And the other thing is with ESG, right?
Yeah.
LoRaWAN is the perfect solution to monitor that and report it. So
Right.
when you've got companies that are bound by ESG guidelines and they need to report it to the board or to their stakeholders, how do you get that data to report you
Sure.
know those various types of measurements? And LoRaWAN does a great job at a cost efficient way to provide the measurement tools around it as well, and so that they can get better and ensure that they're doing environmental or
Right.
employee work environment or whatever the goals are for the organization.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. I wanted to kind of
Yep.
start to pivot now
Okay.
towards the year ahead. But one of the things you asked earlier, and I wanted to expand on this because I'm curious, is you talked about how LoRaWAN became an official standard. When that happens, what does that like? What does that mean, and what does that enable? And that's something that I think a lot of people out there, are learning about different standards now with the growth of Matter and things like that in the smart home. But as we're talking about LoRaWAN becoming a standard, what does that exactly mean, and do you feel like enables kind of as we head into this year?
Well, for LoRaWAN itself, it doesn't change much in that
Okay.
we are an open body, we're an open ecosystem. We created
Right.
the standards, and I'll talk a minute about what that means. But what it does just say is that we have been accepted by an international standards body and recognized as an
Okay.
official standard, which is important, right? To be recognized, and we are incorporated into the ITU standard body organization, and that's really important. But what standardization does is create the venue to have an open ecosystem, ongoing development, ongoing innovation. It's not locked in by any one company.
Okay.
So any and all companies move forward. It tells you that um, if a company or government deploys LoRaWAN, it's here. There's multiple companies they can get devices from. There's multiple companies they can get gateways from, and
Okay.
it is a standard by all and improved by all. So,
Right.
yeah,
Gotcha. Fantastic. And,
yeah.
and as we're heading into kind of this year, where do you see the biggest growth opportunities? Where you expect to see the most adoption? And as it relates to the building, cities, and utility spaces, what are you most expecting to kind of happen in that area as we're going through this year?
Yeah, I think we're just going to see, in terms of buildings and utilities and cities, I think we're going to see enormous growth and continued growth. I mean, that's why
Hmm.
we're focusing there. And we will also continue to see for those cities and buildings that have LoRaWAN deployments, our ecosystem continue to develop new and exciting use cases based on their needs.
Yeah.
And so we will see growth of the extension of LoRaWAN deployments that are already out there. And that
Okay.
is the exciting thing about an ecosystem is that, when the partners get together and they really listen to the cities or the buildings that are saying, listen, I'm having issues with this. Can you help me solve this? I mean, we're already doing these things with LoRaWAN, but here are some additional issues. They get together, they create new devices, and they can continue on and evolve the path with LoRaWAN.
Gotcha. That makes total sense. Are there what would you say are still some of the challenges that maybe remain in the space, or what challenges does the space still face, even with all the advances that we make year after year? Where do you kind of see challenges still existing with with deployments and adoption and things like that?
I think it's just really around ease of use and
Okay,
continue to make it easier to deploy. IoT takes a village to deploy.
sure,
And again, that's where a big open ecosystem comes into play. But it just continue to create new standards like we've done this last year,
right,
to make it easier to, deploy LoRaWAN or develop LoRaWAN, and having the ecosystem partners that get together and create full end-to-end solutions is really important because the customer isn't looking to piecemeal solutions together, right? They have a need, they want to
agreed.
solve it, and they want a solution. They don't want, you know, have to go around and find the different parts of the ecosystem. So our ecosystem does a great job working together to create that full end-to-end solution, which makes deployments easier.
Yeah, I think that goes back to our point earlier about focusing more on the solution, the success stories, more of the application of the
Mhm.
technologies as opposed to different components, and making it feel kind of like a big lift for companies, feeling like you have to go out and figure out what connectivity do you need, what hardware do you need, how are you going to build the UI and the application layer, how are you going to connect to the cloud, what's going to happen on the edge, all that kind of stuff. And the more that these companies can come together kind of behind the scenes and present an end-to-end solution for the companies that really just want something that works and solves their
Mhm.
problem and hits, is affordable, hits their ROI goals and so forth. They don't, I mean, and not in a rude way, but they don't care about the
They
technology
don't.
inside as long as it does what
Right,
it's, what they're asking it to do.
right.
Um, and the more companies that can spend more time making that an easier purchasing process or an adoption process, which, don't get me wrong, a lot of use cases still require customization, still require, different things to be adjusted for their end users and what they're trying to track. But where you can bring it more kind of together to make it an easier buy is something that I think will help contribute to adoption and things like that. But one question I have for you is, like, what are we seeing happen aside from kind of these comments we're making now? What else do you see really helping us overcome this challenge to enable, what a lot of people consider kind of like massive IoT?
Well, a couple things. And I
Okay.
think that, again, we need to have a big ecosystem and so that everybody is playing a part and continuing to develop. So I know I
Yep.
keep saying that, but it's huge. I
Agreed.
think the other challenge is making sure that the end users or the consumers understand how important certification is. We don't
Sure.
talk a lot about that, and I don't know if this is the perfect time, but I don't want to miss bringing up this opportunity to talk about certified devices and certification
Right.
because that is a means to ease of use and making sure that it all works well and out the gate. And it helps with deployments because you know that they're going to work. And so LoRaWAN's done a lot with our certification program. We continue to expand our certification program. So as we roll out new specifications, we have certification programs as appropriate that go along with those specifications so that it's just important. And more governments and businesses are requiring in their tenders and their bids to have LoRaWAN certified devices because as you're rolling out and you're doing massive IoT, not having certified devices feels very risky to me.
Sure.
So that is one key to help with mass adoption is to make
Yeah.
sure that what you're deploying are certified devices.
Right. No, I agree. I think the devices is a very interesting kind of piece to talk about, because a lot of times that's where people start their kind of journey into learning what am I trying
Right.
to accomplish. But to kind of distinguish between the different devices out there and what exactly do I need without it being overkill, without it, not being able to do what I need. Where do I start? And that's a good kind of point. We talked to companies in the past about in the smart home space, more the consumer side, how important it is to be focusing on devices that are certified in some
Mhm.
capacity, approved, and not just buying any old thing you find on Amazon that thinks could do the job. So I think it carries very well over to the enterprise space as well.
Yes, absolutely. And what's interesting, and you talk about mass adoption as well. I see with our members that the relationships that they build with various members or end users. Some of our end users are members like Chevron and Target and whatnot. But the relationships that they build with those end users are long relationships, when it's done well, and hopefully it is there. And so those long relationships, they continue to evolve, they continue to add more use cases, they continue to
Right.
expand the LoRaWAN implementations. And
Right.
that's what I'm seeing, is that
Sure.
the relationships that are having, which is great for our members, but that's what's also driving the massive IoT.
Absolutely. And I remember something I wanted to mention from an earlier point you made about the ecosystem and how important the ecosystem is. I also think it's important for companies to understand how the ecosystem and how their company plays a role with other companies and understand how important partnerships are. I think a
Hmm.
lot of times I run into companies who just kind of almost have a fear of working with others because they just think everyone's a competitor and somehow it's not going to kind of work in the way they envision. But IoT is in such a unique space where you require so many different pieces to
Hmm.
build a solution, and not everyone can specialize and be good at all the different pieces. So, putting a big emphasis on that partnership and understanding, like making yourself more available, reaching out to companies, engaging with companies, finding out how you can build together, just makes that adoption process more realistic to for companies to who are looking to kind of get involved in IoT and adopt solutions. It's a less daunting task for them when you have those companies kind of already have a relationship. And it's just an important thing I think people to really be thinking about while they're building their IoT company to then eventually bring a solution to market.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the successful deployments out there and the successful end users that I see are our members. Some of them are like 3 and 4 members coming together.
Yep.
Again, it does require expertise in different areas, and
Right.
coming together and working together to supply the end-to-end solution. And
Yep.
that's where LoRa Alliance, as an alliance, it is the greatest benefit of being a part of the alliance, is that you are mixing with, speaking with, developing with, innovating with the partners that you need
Right.
to provide the solution, for
Right.
sure.
Totally agree with you. And that's kind of how we've envisioned when we built IoT for All was bringing companies together, not to just share their expertise, but bringing our partners and our members together in a way that's kind of offline a little bit, but in a way that allows like-minded individuals to share what they're doing and not
Hmm.
kind of like promoting, like and trying to sell each other stuff, but just talking about what they do, how they do it, and help to find ways to work together and complement each other. And I've noticed that with the LoRa Alliances. Your members can at times fit very well together, and you all do a very good job of trying to bring them together in order to see how working in a collaborative way is going to just help further not just what they're doing,
Hmm.
but the alliance's mission too. And as we've started recently working a bit more closely with your marketing team about just getting more members involved in sharing their knowledge and expertise from different perspectives, we think all of that is just a win for the audience, for the companies, for the alliance, for
Hmm.
the industry. The more people you can get sharing their knowledge and information, the better it is, and that's kind of
Yeah.
what we're trying to hope advocate for.
Right. Absolutely. And even just true deployments, like business models,
Right.
it's how business models are done. It is multiple members
Absolutely.
coming together for the business model to implement their expertise.
Absolutely. So speaking of the alliance, I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of wrap this up by
Yeah.
talking a little bit about as everything we've talked about going from 2022 to 2023 and what we're looking forward and seeing kind of happen, the challenges in the space and so forth. How is the alliance really helping with this direction we're heading in? I know you've talked about the standard, but I imagine there's probably something
Mhm.
on the certification side that's probably going to contribute to this and so forth. Just talk to us like kind of how you all as an alliance are really contributing to this and helping grow this direction.
Yeah, and again, that is exactly what we do as an alliance. Well, first, let me just say, We do have LoRa Alliance meetings. We in March
Okay,
15 and 16, we have we'll be in Orlando, and it's LoRaWAN Live in Orlando, and
okay,
it's open to members and non-members. It'll be a big event
great.
as well. And that event specifically will be focusing on cities, buildings, and utilities. And it's a great way. So, this is one of the ways that the LoRa Alliance supports the ecosystem, in that we'll have speakers there, we'll have end users there, we'll talk about best practices. We've got technical tracks, how to tracks, certification tracks. So, that is how we
Love
share
that.
cross knowledge
It's
at that
great.
event. And, going back to your question about working together, I actually, in my keynote for Orlando, I'm actually going to be having the city of Calgary come on stage
Cool.
with me. And what's interesting to talk about, they've been doing LoRaWAN deployments for years now, and
Yeah.
they have incredible insights. They have so many use cases deployed. It's amazing. But who else will be on that stage is the LoRaWAN members that work together
Mm,
to put together and continue to drive this the deployments for the city of Calgary. And so OrbiWise, Tectelic,
sure.
11x
Okay.
are examples. They'll all be up on stage, and all of
That's
those
awesome.
members came together
Yeah.
to drive this deployment.
That's great. That's very exciting. I think that event sounds like a really good one. I'm hoping, I can't wait to learn more about it on my end and kind of hear how it goes. Because I think anytime you can not only bring the members together, which we've stressed in this conversation of why it's important, but bringing kind of non-members to educate themselves and learn more about how this alliance, these groups of companies are working together to actually build deployments and help with adoption growth is fantastic.
Yeah. And again, I don't know any other way to do it successfully than the way we're doing it, and it
Yeah,
is successful.
right.
And I wanted to
Right.
say too, and hopefully you'll link it. We just launched a few weeks ago our 2022 year-end report, and
Okay.
it really wraps up from technical to certification to marketing
Fantastic.
to all the events that
Fantastic.
happened
Yeah.
in 2022 and kind of where we're heading in
Okay.
2023. So you'll be able
Well,
to.
we'll share for sure. I'm sure we'll talk with your team and make sure we get that report before this episode goes live so that everybody who listens to this can check it out
Great.
as well. But that's awesome. But Donna, thank you so much again for taking the time to chat with me. For those out there who want to learn more about the alliance, kind of what you have going on, what's the best way they can do that?
They go to our website, LoRa-Alliance.org,
Okay.
and it talks about the Orlando event, the agenda, how to register,
Perfect.
as well as
Perfect.
the alliance overall.
Fantastic. Well, really appreciate your time as
Great.
always, and look forward to hopefully talking again soon.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks so much. Bye.
All right, everyone. Thanks again for watching that episode of the IoT For All podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please click the thumbs up button, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to hit the bell notification so you get the latest episodes as soon as they become available. Other than that, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.